Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to dive into some of the pitching success stories that we are seeing in the minor leagues so far. We're just about 2 weeks or so into the minor league season, but so far our prediction of the year of the pitcher is really looking good thanks to dominant starts the year from pitchers ranging from Cade Pilovitz to Moises Chase to Riley Cooper. We got a lot to dig into tonight. And I'm going to start off right away with Bob's choice because I find it interesting that Bob went to Delmarva. Delmarva right now has won just one game. They're sitting at 1-8 entering this week's action. Yet it doesn't really tell the whole story of how they're performing because their starting pitchers actually look pretty good right now. And Bob's going to highlight a couple of those arms.
Yeah, I'd say their starting pitching looks fantastic. Even the guys that have like some higher ERAs, they still have like great strikeout to walk numbers. And yeah, so I went with a pairing of guys who are very similar in one way and very different in other ways. And that would be Blake Money, the right-handed pitcher out of LSU, and Riley Cooper, the left-handed pitcher out of LSU. Blake Money, he was money. That's terrible. And I'm sure there will be terrible puns with his name for his entire career. We talked about his brother Cash Money. That's a little on the nose, but he so far has a 5.63 ERA, but that's it. Over 8 innings, he has 12 strikeouts and only 1 walk. He gave up 2 home runs in his second game. So I would say he's pitching even better than that ERA would indicate. His stuff looks great. The command looks good. And then in the other side of things, Riley Cooper, the lefty, who looks like an older Creed Willems if he was a pitcher on the mound and threw left-handed. Over 6 2/3 innings, he's given up 9 hits, 0 walks, and 10 strikeouts to a 1.35 ERA. And these were both guys who, at least I figured, again, relief pitchers, okay, these guys are interesting relief arms, 1 or 2 inning stints here in the Orioles system. And then they start the year in the rotation. Cooper's second game, I think, he came out of the bullpen, but he still was stretched out and threw multiple innings like he was a starter. And I think all of a sudden they went from like guys who are at the back end of a top 100 or just like an interesting arm not on my personal top 100 to all of a sudden I'm like, okay, do I consider these guys for the top 50? And I've at least moved them up a little bit because very intriguing stuff. And again, they could still be relievers long term, but right now they're on the Alex Fan path, and I like to see it.
Yeah, Blake Money he throws in the mid 90s and he throws a lot of strikes. Like that's gonna play as he moves up this organization. The walk he had in his last outing was the first walk of his pro career. So he's got 17 2/3 innings, and he's walked just one guy so far since the Orioles drafted him out of LSU. I like Blake Money. Riley Cooper intrigues the hell out of me, not just because he's listed at 270 pounds, and he is every bit of that, if not a little bit more. It's not the beard, which it is a caveman beard. It is a Bud Light. Give me a Bud Light at the end of a hard day beard. He's got the flowing locks as well, coming out the back of the baseball hat. I love this guy's mound presence. He shows some energy. He shows some fire. I remember watching him at LSU. He had 3 or 4 saves. He had 3 saves in that College World Series that they won. The guy is just a bulldog late in games for LSU. I don't know how deep his pitch mix is. I think he's primarily like fastball slider type guy. I don't think he has super high velo either, but it seems like it's stuff that really plays up well. But you look at his time at LSU, he struck out a lot of guys. He did not walk a lot of guys at all in college. So I think that's pretty interesting moving forward. And he threw more pitches yesterday than Michael Ferret did. It was Sunday. Michael Ferret got the start. Riley Cooper, like you mentioned, came in relief. And Cooper ended up throwing more pitches than Ferret, which I thought was interesting because I assumed Riley Cooper was strictly a relief prospect. And I've mentioned before what you do when you assume a guy's going to be a relief pitcher in this organization. The Orioles throw a curveball at you and say, we're going to stretch him out as a starter. And I mentioned this in this morning's daily for Patreons that I was kind of trying to search some more stuff on Riley Cooper. And I did find a note from someone on Twitter, some draft guys talking about Riley Cooper leading up to the draft and what his draft prospects were. And the conversation basically got to like Cooper could be a guy that in the right organization they stretch him out, because at LSU there are typically so many arms. There's only 3 weekend spots on a college rotation. So there's so few starting innings to go around, but LSU is typically loaded with so many quality arms that guys just don't get a chance to be stretched out. And could Cooper in the right organization with his pitch metrics and his really good command, could he be a guy that gets stretched out to be a starter? It seems like the Orioles want to at least experiment with that moving forward. I mean, we'll see. He's like 6'2", 6'3", 270. So we'll see how that could hold up in a starter's role. But man, he's just so much fun to watch right now. I don't even care how high he goes in the organization. I just want to watch this guy pitch every single week right now.
Yeah, obviously extremely small sample size, but Riley Cooper, 34.5% strikeout rate, 0% walk rate. Blake Money, 36.4% strikeout rate, 3% walk rate. Those numbers will play.
I had a chance to watch Cooper start against Salem last Tuesday, and while a lot of the angles I was seeing were from behind home plate, it was hard to really see how the pitches were moving. You could see enough to know that his breaking stuff just drops off the table. Hitters can't square up on it. It's got some good movement down late in the zone, and I think that he's going to really be successful this year because of that he can put those pitches wherever he wants them. And then Money, with his velocity and with the fact that his command is so good, to me, he could be one of the big breakout candidates for this season. So I'm really excited to see what he does the rest of the way.
I do think it's unfair that they're both pitching in low A, but still, for me, like they're older college guys facing younger international prospects for the most part. But the walk to strikeout numbers, like that's what I'm paying most close attention to. Keep piling up those strikeouts, keep limiting those walks. And I mean, at the same time, where are you going to put them though? Like you can't just move up to Aberdeen because there are no innings to go around in Aberdeen right now. We'll talk about some arms in Aberdeen, which might have the best group of pitchers in this entire organization. Aberdeen is must-watch TV every single night on the minor league side of things go. But yeah, it's at least this is an opportunity to just get them stretched out, and let's see if they have some starters potential down there. And just keep, hopefully those strikeout numbers and walk numbers stay consistent. And if they keep working deeper and deeper into games, they're throwing 60, 70, maybe giving up to 80 pitches an outing, I'm even more intrigued by these guys.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of these guys won't be in Delmarva for too long, but then you have to – it's just the pipeline is so clogged. It's like AAA, you have McDermott, Povich, and Armbruster. They're not going anywhere. AA loaded, high A loaded, low A loaded. So eventually they'll all move up, but I don't know if they're going to be in a huge rush.
We're going to Nick now because he's going to highlight some of those arms at Aberdeen.
Let's move up the ladder. Let's talk about Moises Chase first, because I feel like a lot of people are talking about Moises Chase right now. A guy who I know when I was at other websites, some that we were at together, I wrote a lot about Chase. Someone who I know early on when we started the show in 2020, he was an arm I feel like we highlighted a lot as a guy in the lower levels of the minor leagues that intrigued us. I don't remember I feel like he was a top 30 in some of our early lists, or maybe he always just missed. I feel like him and Raul Rangel maybe always just missed our list. And so we always did like that, the guys who just missed list show before the season started. And we always would talk about Chase and Rangel. Well, Rangel is no longer in the organization, unfortunately, but Chase, the kid's in high A, and he's got 15 strikeouts to 2 walks in 8 innings, no runs allowed, which is phenomenal right now. He's 20 years old, so he's 2 years younger than the competition, which shout out on Twitter. Somebody commented, it's kind of mind blowing how you talk about like Chase is doing so well in high A at 20 and is so much younger than the competition, but Jackson Holliday is 20 in the major leagues, which go back to our previous episode about Jackson Holliday. But yeah, Chase is just pitching extremely well. I did not expect to see him pitch this well this early on after getting the bump up to Aberdeen. And I know Steve Molesky had a tweet after Sunday night's game, passing along some notes from a scout who was there. He said Chase was up to 95.5 miles per hour yesterday, spinning it well, getting whiffs primarily on this four-seamer and his changeup. Like, I feel like every year we always say going into the year that Aberdeen doesn't have the sexiest pitching staff to start the year, but this is where we see an arm or two really pop. And it looks like Moises Chase is one of these guys who is popping so far this year because, my God, nobody is touching him so far in his first 2 outings.
I could not be more excited for Moises Chase. I mean, I was saying before the show started, like my 2 eyeball emojis of the year so far on the minor league side were Frederick Bencosme on the offensive side and Moises Chase on the pitching front. I mean, we've always kind of put Chase, Davy Cruz, Juan De Los Santos, and maybe Edgar Portis in like the same bucket. Well, Chase is no longer in that bucket, at least for me. He has put himself firmly ahead of those guys with his start. And it's not just because, he pitched good for these 8 innings. I'm telling you, the stuff has always been electric, but he's always had really high walk rates. He 12, 15, and 17.5% walk rates the last few years. It's only been getting worse and worse. But I think we noted last year, especially in the summer before he was kind of shut down with maybe a minor injury or just they wanted to just limit his innings at some point, that the command was starting to get better for all of those guys that I just listed off before. But it's 6.9% walk rate so far. If he can keep any semblance of this command that he's showing right now, he's going to be just bursting up the ladder here. I think he's going to be, we talk about Luis De Leon a lot as a fantastic pitching prospect, and we will continue to do so very shortly. But Moises Chase is 2 months younger than Luis De Leon and dominating Aberdeen in his first 2 appearances, while Luis De Leon is still in Delmarva, probably not for long, but he is there. Chase is a absolute stud. His stuff looks electric. Thank you, Aberdeen, for installing some nice cameras. Got great looks of his pitches. 2-seamer, 4-seamer, slider. It tunnels. It's like I'm feeling Gene Pinto 2021 vibes right now with Moises Chase.
When I watch Chase pitch this year, I see a possible future major league starter, which is not something I would have necessarily said last year, even on his good outings, because it was often he'd have to get by on 1 or 2 pitches. His command was always shaky. And this year he's coming out throwing mid to upper 90s. First of all, that's in April. This is the time of year where I don't really pay attention to velocity readings because I expect the fastball is going to be down a couple of ticks early on. Right now, he's pretty consistently 94 to 96. He's also mixing in a sweeper that looks excellent. That is a real out pitch for him. The changeup looks good. He's got a 2-seam fastball that he can throw.
Did we lose him?
I think we might have.
He was going in there.
On the 2-seamer. Yeah, I don't know. Did he always have the 4-seamer and the? Nope. Nick, you would know. Did he have this 2-seamer last year?
I'd have to go back.
I don't remember him having 2 distinct fastballs the way he's throwing right now.
No, I'm pretty sure we wrote about him up. I'd have to visit the old stomping grounds to see what I wrote about him. But yeah, if he's got like a 4 or 5 pitch mix now, that's going to be pretty devastating, I think. And it really wasn't, like you mentioned, it was just the walks because he had like 100 strikeouts. I don't have his page up in front of me. I want to say it's like 100 strikeouts in 60 something innings last year in Delmarva. The strikeouts were never an issue. It was the walks, but they went down tremendously as the season progressed last year. And then he had multiple injuries the last 2 years. And it was never anything serious, but it was always just like when he tripped on the mound and he missed, I think, a couple of weeks after that, a freak injury. It was always just those small little injuries that piled up that caused him to miss so much time. I'm just glad he's pitching so well right now in Aberdeen. But we can, Zach hopefully comes. Nope, he's not moving again. We'll move to the other guy real quick, Luis De Leon, so we'll go back down to Delmarva for this one. But I wanted to hide De Leon because I feel like, honestly, he was the breakout guy last year, one of the big breakouts in the system last year. And this year, he's getting completely overshadowed, I feel like, with all the pitching in Bowie and Delmarva and Aberdeen. But De Leon's made 2 starts now. So again, we preface all of this with small sample size, but 7 2/3 innings, 4 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts for De Leon. So strikeout rate of 31%. Walks were an issue for him last year. He walked 14% of batters he faced last year. He's at 7% right now through 2 starts. So that is a promising start. And the ground ball numbers, 62% ground ball rate this year. It was 73% last year in Delmarva, 63% in the FCL, 64% in the DSL the year before. Those are absurd numbers for a starting pitcher. And I think someone asked, why was he still in low A? And honestly, I think it's just innings, because there are younger arms, like we just talked about Chase at Aberdeen. And you got guys like Juan De Los Santos, who are, 21, 22 years old, above him in high A. But all those guys had a ton of innings in Delmarva over the last 2 years. And they need to be challenged now in high A if the organization still believes in them. De Leon had just 26 innings last year in Delmarva. So I think 2 months in low A isn't going to be a huge issue. He just turned 21 yesterday, Sunday. So he could find himself finishing the year in Aberdeen and then pushing to start 2025 in AA a few weeks before he turns 22 years old as a left-handed pitching prospect who received a couple $1,000 signing bonus. He's getting overshadowed, but don't overlook Luis De Leon in his starts of the year.
Not in the slightest. I mean, I think it's underreported or at least underrecognized, especially by me, the ground ball rate. I did not even realize he was getting almost a 75% ground ball rate last year in Delmarva to go along with a strikeout percentage approaching 30. This is like prime relief closer Zach Britton as a starting pitcher. Pretty phenomenal. So yeah, love De Leon is just doing what he's doing. He's improved on his numbers from last year. The strikeout rate, again, it's very small sample size, is right about the same as it was last year. The walk rate has been cut in half so far early on. So can't complain whatsoever. And I look forward to seeing him. I'm going to make a point to get out to Aberdeen sometime soon, hopefully to see Chase and Luis De Leon a little bit later in the year when he gets inevitably called up.
I've made this point before, and I firmly believe it's true, that De Leon has the elements of a top 100 prospect. Hard fastball from the left side to go with a slider and a changeup. Those two pitches are behind the fastball in terms of his development. But when they catch up, which I'm pretty confident they're going to, look out, because he just is so... First of all, I think he's beyond his age skill-wise. And while I trust the Orioles development plan, and I'm sure that there's a lot of reasons that don't have to do with performance for the fact that he's in Delmarva, because as we've discussed tonight, you've only got so many guys to give innings to. That's true at Aberdeen. It's true at Bowie as well. So you need to see some movement up. But I just don't see him being challenged at low A at all this year. I really think that the next big move for him has to be a promotion to Aberdeen, and hopefully sooner rather than later, because he's so far looking like he's going to simply overmatch low A hitters. When last year he came up and it was a nice story, and for a pitcher being as young as he was, his command looked pretty good. But this year I think he's taken it to another level. So I hope that he's in Aberdeen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think someone else pointed this out last year that it's the changeup was the separator, though. It's not as good. It might not be as good as a fastball right now, but the fact that he had it and he commanded it so well and it was so effective last year at 20 years old in low A, that was huge for him. And I was trying to think as Zach was talking there, how many, if he's throwing 95, 96 miles an hour from the left side, are there any other lefties in the system who throw harder than that? I don't know. Povich is 93, 94. Luis De Leon might be the hardest throwing lefty that the Orioles have down in the minor leagues. So, and he's a flamethrower.
It's a good point. Yeah, I'm trying to do a quick scan, and I'm not coming up with much there on that front.
Yeah, because most of the lefties in the Orioles system are kind of, you kind of look at in tiers where you have a lot of guys that are in the similar buckets like Davy Cruz, Juan Rojas, who are probably low 90s, maybe occasionally touch the mid 90s. Then you have Povich, who's consistently mid 90s. And then De Leon is above him. And I don't think there's anybody else in that tier where you're going to be throwing fastballs 95, 96 miles per hour and being able to sustain it a little bit in his starts, which is important to see because we can see guys spike the fastball up here and there. You're seeing with Cole Irvin, in the major leagues right now. But can you sustain it throughout a whole game? And I think as De Leon develops, he's going to be able to.
Yeah, the only guy I could think is let's keep an eye on Francisco Morale this year. Should start in the FCL. Maybe he's a lefty. Maybe he's added a tick or two, and then he can get up to Delmarva this year, and we can see what he's got. But yeah, Luis De Leon. So right now is standing on his own.
One more point, real quick, before we got to talk about, especially one of Zach's guys here, because we missed talking about him last week when we should have. But it's early; we get excited with everybody starting. But remember last year, Luis De Leon pitched that one inning at the game right before the trade deadline, and we thought he was getting traded. I'm convinced myself that the Cardinals really wanted Luis De Leon, and the Orioles were maybe able to push them towards Zach Showalter. If that is the case, I don't know if it is or not, but it was just weird timing. Thank God he was not included as part of that deal. But
yeah, unless it was Jordan Montgomery was maybe that's who would have gone if we would have got him. But yeah, I'm happy he's still here. That's for sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'll go to my pitchers now, and I've got 3 guys I want to highlight. I'm going to start off with Cameron Weston, who delivered one of the best starts to this young season we've seen by any Orioles minor leaguer last week against Wilmington. 5 no-hit innings. The only batter to reach base did so on a hit by pitch against Weston with 9 strikeouts to no walks. And when we've talked about Weston in the past, which we've talked about him a lot since he came off the IL last summer, it's always been about he's got a really deep pitch mix. He has this changeup that moves in this really unique way. But his fastball, I've come to the conclusion that it's an underrated pitch because while the velocity isn't necessarily there, he's not going to overpower hitters. It has such good late movement. It's got that good hoppy movement that we know the Orioles really look for in their pitchers. And you could see in this start against Wilmington, fastball coming in, able to dart up at the last minute. It's a good pitch. And when he's able to locate it like he was in that start, he can mix in any of his other pitches and be successful. And so far, we just talked about how De Leon doesn't really belong in Delmarva, or maybe doesn't belong in Delmarva development-wise. Weston's in the same boat at Aberdeen. I was kind of surprised that he was not on Bowie's roster to start the year, and I have to think that he's going to be one of the first guys up.
Yeah, he just knows how to pitch, man. He knows how to mix his pitches and take advantage of that. The changeup is the highlight. I think he could honestly just be an elite reliever in a few years, but there's no reason not to have him starting games because he's pitching fantastically over multiple innings. And until proven otherwise, I think you just keep doing that. And if he's going to have 5 or 6 pitches and be able to control him the way he has been last year and so far this year, then he's a dude.
Always been a guy that I've been intrigued by since the Orioles drafted him, but we just never really been able to watch him for an extended period of time because he just had a couple innings after he got drafted. And then he was shut down last year because he had tendonitis. I don't remember if it was elbow or shoulder, but I'm pretty sure it was tendonitis, what we found out. But he started late and only had 40 innings. So that was like piggyback innings that he ended up getting. So he's still sporting this year in high A. I don't hate that he's in high A right now because it's giving him a chance to stretch out, get some of those innings, work deeper into games. And he's still sporting that 55% ground ball rate and keeping the ball in the yard. And that's kind of why I think I do think he gets moved up to Bowie soon. He's a college guy. They drafted him out of Michigan. So even though he might be a little bit behind in terms of getting innings under his belt, he's an older, more experienced arm. And I could see him potentially being a guy who works his way to the big leagues as a really fun bullpen option. And I know the goal this offseason was to bulk up and add more velo. I'm not sure exactly what he's throwing right now, but if he adds a few more ticks to his fastball and continues to post those impressive ground ball numbers, not late this year, probably late next year, but late next year, Cameron Weston's a guy who I'm looking at as that's a guy you potentially bring up late in the year as a bullpen option in the major leagues, I think.
Oh, I could absolutely see it. Just, I feel like he's going to be one of those guys that as he gets to levels, he's going to be able to adjust quickly. So I would not rule that out at all. I'll go to my next guy, and it's someone we talk about a lot on the show, and we talk about him a lot for good reason. He's a good pitcher. He has good stuff. But I thought it would be worth checking in on Trace Bright tonight. And so far, Bright has made 2 appearances with the Bay Sox, 2 starts. First outing, 3 2/3 scoreless, strikes out 6. Parts of it weren't great. 5 innings, 3 runs, all of them earned, 8 hits. He gave up 2 homers. But the big thing for me is that he got through that start without a walk. And so far this season, he has 14 strikeouts to just 2 walks. One of the things we saw with Bright last year was that he hit a little bit of a rough patch. I think it was in May with Aberdeen to start last year, and his command would just get away from him some outings. He could go out one start and look really good and then come back out the next one and issue a lot of walks. That calmed down a little bit as we went into the summer, and it carried over to some extent when he got the late season promotion to Bowie. But it really does look like he's continuing to refine his command, and I think that's ultimately going to be the X factor in determining what his ceiling is going to be at the major league level, because there's no question when you look at the fastball most nights, that is a big league pitch. But it's always been, going back to his days at Auburn, is he going to be able to develop enough of a repertoire outside the fastball to be successful? And not only is he doing that right now, but I think he's doing that to the point where it's a lot easier to envision him developing as a starter than it was this time last year.
My Trace Bright for minor league pitcher of the year prediction becomes more and more true through these first 2 starts. I love it. I do agree that coming into the year, I think it was safe to say, like, when you're trying to think of and dream on what is Trace Bright's ceiling in this organization, it was always limited by the control, because he had the 13% walk rate in high A and 11% walk rate in double A. So like you mentioned, it did get better. 2%, that's an improvement. It's at 5% walk rate right now through his first 2 outings, with a strikeout rate of 37.8%, 14 strikeouts to 2 walks in 8 2/3 innings. That's a fantastic start to the season, because we've talked about this before. With a lot of these pitchers, we've seen them get to double A and we see them throw more strikes. They're forced to live in the zone more because guys aren't going to chase your junk anymore now that you're getting into the double A and the upper levels of the minor leagues. So they're being forced to live in the zone more. And typically we've seen the dip in strikeouts from a lot of guys, but Bright, through 2 starts at least, is getting more strikeouts, which I think is another great sign of his. And I just feel like, as big of a Trace Bright guy as I am, I am so anxious to see if he can eliminate some of that Cade Povich inconsistency that he showed last year, because, and you touched on that as well. We'll talk about Cade Povich in a second, but I feel like Bright was kind of the same way, where it would be a really good start where he went 5 scoreless with like double-digit strikeouts. He had, I don't know how many double-digit strikeout games he had last year, 3 or 4 at least. But then he'd have those starts where he couldn't get out of the second inning, or he couldn't get out of the third inning. He walked 5 batters. He gives up 6, 7, 8 runs. So far, he's 2 for 2. And it was like some nights he's pitching like a top 100 prospect. Other nights he's not making it out of the second inning. So far, he's got 2 starts where even when he gets roughed up, like he did against Hartford a little bit, and it was really 2 home runs. And I said this in the daily. One of them was just a great pitch and an even better swing. The hitter got the best of him. Hat tip to the hitter there. The other one was like, I think it was a slider that he just left right in the middle of the zone. So that one was his fault. But the no walks and 8 strikeouts was the biggest thing for me with Bright, because that was the limiting factor with him. And if he's going to continue that walk rate, my prediction is going to come true. I'm going to double down on it.
Yeah, the stuff is so good. If he's going to be able to limit the walks like that, then yeah, sky's the limit for him. Honestly, he could be he could be the next Kyle Bradish. I don't know if anyone said that, but I disappeared for a while. But I feel like he's got that kind of upside. And yeah, if he can just continue to earn the command.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Bob, because I think that Bradish as a prospect has some similarities to Bright now. Both guys had good fastballs. They had good curveballs. But the big question mark was always, are they going to actually develop a starter's pitch mix? And are they going to be able to command their pitches consistently? Because that was a knock on Bradish probably up until last year, was the command just isn't always there. And then last year he finishes 4th in Cy Young voting. Bright right now, I hope, is on a similar trajectory, because I think this stuff could really play up against major league hitters.
And Bright touched 97 on Sunday against Hartford, according to their radar gun. I don't know if I've seen him hit 97 up to this point in his career. That's pretty fun too. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go now to my last pitcher, and Nick actually just mentioned him. It is Cade Povich. I think we've known really since he came over to this organization as part of the Jorge Lopez trade back to 2022 deadline that Povich has very, very high potential. A lefty who can throw in the mid 90s, has enough pitches to be a starter, doesn't come along very often. So you want to see what he can do. Last year, he led the Orioles minor leagues in strikeouts, but it was kind of an uneven year. And when you go through his game log last season, you can find 2 or 3 good starts at any point, given time of the year, 2 or 3 good starts sandwiched in between 2 or 3 really bad ones. And in the bad ones, he would have sort of this, lack of a better way to describe it, snowball effect, where the walks would pile up and then he'd give up a home run or an extra base hit at an inopportune time. And there would usually be one really bad inning in that start. And so far this year, Povich is showing strides in both those areas. You go through his game log right now, he's made 3 starts. In those 3 starts, he's issued a combined 5 walks while striking out 24. And this is the really key thing for me. Just 1 home run allowed. And that was back in his first start against, or actually his most recent start against Scranton Wilkes-Barre. That was the first time he's given up a home run all year. And it was still an excellent outing. That was the only hit that he surrendered. He struck out 10 batters, walked just 2. I think that if he's able to continue to make strides at his command and just prevent the big inning, he's got a real shot to get starts in the major leagues before this season ends.
The breakout is here. The Cade Povich breakout is here. The consistency was the last thing that we needed to see. And obviously it's only been 3 games, but he did not put 3 games together like this for the entirety of 2023, whether it was AA or AAA. In his first start, he wasn't getting many swings and misses, but his command was on point. He was dropping curveballs in for strikes. His CSW was high, mostly from looking strikes, and that worked for him. And then in his second and third starts, the swing and miss was off the charts. I mean, I think he's got the highest swinging strike rate of anyone in minors, or at least AAA. I think Nick tweeted that out from our account, and it shows. He looks phenomenal. He's able to mix his pitches, and man, that curveball with the 94-mile-an-hour fastball, it's I would not be surprised if he was starting in place of Cole Irvin. Wait, John Means is coming back. I don't know if John Means has a setback for whatever reason. Hopefully not. I could see Povich taking Irvin's spot by May.
Yeah, we always talk about the hitters and how comfortable I felt, even though you had that rough patch. We talked about the rough patch last week, and I was like, all right, well, even if some guys don't break out, you've got Kerstad and Mayo and Norby, you've got the reinforcements, which is waiting down there in AAA. I feel like if there's a setback with Means, or I don't know when we're releasing this portion of the episode, but Tuesday night, is that when Bradish is pitching for Bowie? Is it Wednesday? It's Tuesday. Tuesday night, I'm going to be watching that start, and I'm probably not going to watch the Kyle Bradish outing live, because I'll be holding my breath with each pitch, because I'm scared to death of any Kyle Bradish news that comes out. But if, God forbid, there is a setback with Bradish, it is nice to see Povich excelling the way he is, and that there is an arm, a starter, waiting in the wings. And I think all 3 of us would probably have assumed it was going to be Chase McDermott after what he did last year and then what he did in spring training. Unfortunately, he's made 3 starts and walked 5 guys in each start. But Povich has a 42% strikeout rate and 8% walk rate, which he had a 15% walk rate in AAA last year. And the whiffs are the biggest thing for me. He had 3 whiffs against Charlotte his first outing, came back out 5 days later, faced Charlotte again, put up 16 whiffs, came out against Scranton Wilkes-Barre and put up 16 whiffs once again. And I think Baseball Savant had him categorized as 5 different pitches thrown in that game, which I think he throws much more than that. We had him on the show. Go search the archives, listen to our Cade Povich interview. He was great. I think he's had to get rid of some pitches because there were too many. But he got whiffs on all 5 of the pitches that Baseball Savant had categorized in that last start. So it's not just one pitch he's doing it on. he's doing it with all of them. So I love to see the consistency, like you guys mentioned, because it was not there at all last year. And so far, he's 3 for 3.
Let's hope that continues. And we'll go now to our final segment of the show. We like to do this each week where we shout out a player who is outside of the top 30 portion of our top 50 prospects list for something that they've done, whether it's been a good game, a good week, or maybe just something interesting in their stat line that we want to point out. And I'll go ahead and start this segment with Bob.
Yeah, I'll get the less interesting one out of the way first, but I just don't want this guy to be completely forgotten. It's Isaac De Leon, first base / third base international signing that was by the Marlins, who we traded for. Was a shortstop when we got him, but he's grown out of that. 6'3", 210. He's listed at now, but he's only 22 years old. Second time through High A Aberdeen, 20 plate appearances to start the season, 6 games. But it's nice to see him batting .278 with a .739 OPS, which is a 124 WRC plus. I just think he's still got a little bit of potential. I liked him in 2022 into 2023. His strikeout rate continues to get better. He's maintaining an above average walk rate at the same time. I don't think he's ever going to be this huge power hitter, but could potentially work out as a role player at some point in his career. But the pitcher, I'm going back to Delmarva, and he had an amazing start in his second professional outing. It's Michael Ferret, and he is just turned 20 years old, actually. I thought he was a little bit older than that, but in his first time out, he went 3 innings, gave up 6 runs, 5 earned, struck out 4 batters. Not ideal, obviously, but then in his second time out, got the win by pitching 5 scoreless, hitless innings, only walked 1 batter, struck out 7, and hit a batter. Just think it's another talented arm that we have to keep an eye out on. 34.4% strikeout rate, walk rate just under 10%, and can't wait to see what he does in his next time out. And we didn't even mention Jacob Cravey, Levi Wells, the list goes on and on.
Yeah, can we also just highlight real quick Michael Ferret? I found this tweet. I posted a copy and pasted the tweet in Discord last night. Guy was sitting 91 and 93 last year. He's now sitting 95, topping out 97, and he throws the death ball. So he's instantly my favorite pitcher in this organization. I'm gonna go my pitcher first, and I'm gonna go a relief style. We got to talk about more relief pitchers here, especially considering we may be seeing some of these guys in the big league soon. But I'm going to go Dylan Hyde, just because Dylan Hyde went 3 2/3 innings against Hartford this past week across 2 outings. He had 0 hits, 0 runs, 0 walks, 3 strikeouts. I can't remember who started his first outing. It might have been the Branovich game that got away from him, but Hyde came in. There's a runner on first base, immediately gets a double play, and then he strikes out, gets the final out on a 97-mile-per-hour fastball. He's jacked coming off the mound, like trying to inject some life into this Bowie team. I love the energy. I had never seen that from Dylan Hyde on the mound. Comes out Saturday and shoves 2 2/3 innings. He's not just a 1-inning guy. He's regularly pumping 97 miles per hour, at least on these broadcast guns. Last year, he had a 2.58 ERA, a 185 average against, and 68 strikeouts in 45 innings between Aberdeen and Bowie. I'm keeping my eye on Dylan Hyde this year. I know like the minor leagues don't have that defined like closer setup roles, but I would love to see Hyde kind of step up and be that high leverage arm in Bowie. Hopefully not for long though. Hopefully we see him in AAA pretty soon. And for my hitter, I'm going to go Jalen Vasquez. We've highlighted him before as a really intriguing 20th round draft pick. And this past week, he went 4 for 10 with a double, a triple, walked 6 times and struck out just 1 time. Also had 3 stolen bases. I've also been really enjoying watching him play shortstop for Aberdeen. He didn't even have the most walks or strikeouts on his team this week. And it wasn't Enrique Bradfield Jr. that bested him. It was actually Tavian Josenberger, who had 7 walks and 4 stolen bases. But just wanted to throw another name in there. But 2 very fun pieces in this Aberdeen lineup. And Vasquez right now, coming into this week's games, has a 184 OPS, which ranks 5th among all Orioles minor league hitters. And the top 2 hitters in WRC plus in the Orioles organization, I don't know if you guys have looked. Do you guys know who's number 1 right now? It is Creed Willems at number 1, the highest WRC plus. And number 2 on that list is another catcher, Anudis Mordon. So Jalen Vasquez up there with the top prospects of Creed Willems and Anudis Mordon in terms of WRC plus. Just fun to see. I really love watching this kid play ball.
Yeah. If I could just shout out a couple other Bowie relievers, Keegan Gillis continuing his dominant relief role. And guys, the Cage Stroud thing might be happening now. He's always had great stuff. I think John Mioli was like, don't be surprised if he's protected from the Rule 5 draft a year or two ago. I saw him at spring training walk the stadium. He just can touch triple digits, but was walking a million people well. So far this year, 0 ERA over 4.2 innings, only allowed 2 hits, 0 walks, and 7 strikeouts. So just something to keep an eye on.
Good call there. And I'm going to stick Bowie's bullpen for my pitcher. Trey Mago is off to a very good start down in Bowie this year. Mago, just to go back a little bit here, was originally drafted by the Pirates in the 24th round in 2019 and moved through their system pretty quickly. He reached AAA in 2021 and was off to a good start there, but unfortunately had an elbow injury, had to undergo Tommy John surgery, and then the Orioles were able to pick him up in the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft before last season. He got in some brief game action before the year ended, and he's back at Bowie this year. And so far, it looks like the Orioles are showing a little bit of caution. They're keeping him right now to 1 or 2 inning relief outings, but it's going really well for him. And in particular, last week was a good week for him. He had 2 outings at Hartford, going combined 3 innings in that stretch, 3 strikeouts to 1 walk. He picked up a save in Saturday's doubleheader. I expect Mago is going to get to, some good innings in AAA this year, or a good number of innings in AAA this year. But the Orioles, I think, wisely easing him back in a little bit here. And this was someone that back in the offseason we were discussing, should he be protected from the Rule 5 draft? That ultimately didn't happen, but he's making a strong case now to be on the radar for innings at AAA later this year and possibly even in the big leagues. And then for hitters, Silas Ardway had an interesting week. Tuesday night's game against Hartford, he takes a pitch off the nose, has to come out of the game. Actually, he's not in the lineup for a few days, but he made the most of his return, appearing in one game of Saturday's doubleheader and going 2 for 4 with a double. He followed that up to 1 for 5 performance on Sunday. Small sample size, but he is off to a good start this year. And I think a reason to be encouraged is that after really struggling at the plate with Aberdeen last year, he was promoted to Bowie and performed really well down the stretch. And we were curious to see, okay, he looked good at Double-A last year, but that's still just 28 games, 117 plate appearances. Is that actually going to hold up over a full season? And so far, it's looking like it might. So Ardway, first off, great job bouncing back from a pretty scary moment, but he's really producing at the plate.
How many catchers can we throw into this final segment and not mention Samuel Basayo? That's the challenge.
That does it for this week's episode. We're going to be back later in the week to take listener questions covering things both in the majors and the minors. You're not going to want to miss that. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up for as little as $3 a month, and at the $5 and $10 levels to have access to bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, covering all things Orioles minor leagues. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles Are on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.
You know when you're listening to a true crime story that has an unbelievable plot twist that makes you stop in your tracks? That's what our podcast, People Are the Worst, brings you with each episode. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Rebecca. We're identical twins who love true crime cases that make you say, didn't see that coming, and we hate the people responsible for them. Listen to People Are the Worst now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.